Vic Dickinson, but first of all, I mean, he's one of the true originals. Nobody else played the trombone like Vic did. You know, he was a total original, and what he played was so, you know, so real and just amazing. So I was a big fan of Vic's, and I, you know, got to know him by and by, and.
Do you remember when and where you first heard him? Do you
When I
remember?
first heard him live?
Yeah, or record. Well, records or live.
From records, I think the first thing that really got me, although I have heard bits and pieces, like he never got enough solos from Basie, I think, you know. But there was Dickie Wells, you know. So,
Yeah.
but the two of them are, you know, in a way, they're quite closely related, but you know. Both had a great sense of humor. But the first thing I really got of Vic, I was a Hot Lips Page fan, so he recorded with Lips, and there's this thing with the two of them on their album Ammon's Name called Bottom Blues. And it's about the things that oh man, you know, so, you know, that hooked me. So Vic was somebody that I really wanted to, you know, get to know because I really loved his music. And the way I think one of the highlights in Vic's career was when he and Bobby Hackett got together. And it was, you know, it was really a marriage made in music heaven because in a way they were, you know, very different, but in a way they were very closely related. And they were such good friends. And the band they had was wonderful. I think it was one of the best, if you want to call it a traditional jazz or whatever it was much more than that in range. And they both, you know, both of them knew songs that nobody else knew, you know, and they're both great ballad players, and they both, you know, it was just great. They came to Chicago together and opened at a place, Harriet, you know, about that, you know, the place had not promoted them well, and there was hardly anybody there. And they had a poster. It's still at the Institute. Had a poster for the thing, and Bobby took out, there was a red crayon thing. He wrote on the, in big letters, he wrote on the thing, "Tilt!" exclamation point. But he and Vic, you know, and when Bobby died, there was a big blow to Vic. It really was. I got to know Vic quite well just on the basis of seeing him, you know, in clubs and stuff. And I remember once we were somewhere in New Jersey or something. He gave me a ride back to the city, and we were talking about something. We were talking about, I don't know what came into the thing, but he started singing. You know, I loved his singing. He started singing a Wolverine thing called "Big Boy." You know, he knew all the words to all these things. Yes, anyway, when I interviewed him for that National Endowment for the Arts thing, the nice thing about these interviews was that they paid the interviewees, the people being interviewed, $2,000, which was then, nobody ever got $2,000 for an interview. Didn't get anything from an interview. So it was easy to approach people and ask them to do it. They immediately would say yes. But the one with Vic turned out to be the longest lasting, because I could tell Vic was living in what had been a project up in the Bronx, and he had a really nice apartment, and that's when I became aware of, although I think Harriet Choice had told me before about Vic's cooking, but he insisted on, every time we had a date in the camp, he would want to make dinner, and he had this kitchen was so, everything was so well arranged. Vic had a background. It came, do you know how it happened?
Yes,
Yeah.
he fell off a ladder.
Fell off a ladder. His father was a house, did work and.
Bricklayer, I
Brick,
think.
yeah. So that's how that happened. But he had everything arranged.
I have to stop for a second. It's quite marvelous. I will never forget this. Here I am sitting with somebody and we're telling stories about how Vic Dickinson injured his back. Nobody else in the world may care about this. The hell with them. Go on.
So he had everything arranged in the kitchen. It was so that he could sort of pivot around and reach everything, his pots and pans, his spices, whatever it was. Remember, one of the things he made was a roast beef, but it wasn't a rare roast beef. It was cooked with juices. It was so good. Oh man, I can still taste that. Everything was perfect. So I could tell with the interviews that really he wanted company, because what it turned out to be was that we spent more time doing other things. Maybe sometimes he'd have he was a big baseball fan, he'd have a baseball game on, and we started talking about something and we would have a long conversation, and it wouldn't be the interview. I could tell that he really wanted me to come back, that's in retrospective. So it turned out to be a pretty long, investment in this interview. But there were, things that I remember. I remember asking him about, things like we were talking about, we talked about Lester Young, and we talked about singing the blues, which became such a famous record. So I asked him, I said, why do you think, why did this become such a hit with musicians? So he said, well, he started to think, he said, it said everybody played that number, they would go, da 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 da, ba ba da 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 da, ba da da ba da ba 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 ba. Bell, turned it into a bell. That's the answer. I asked him about trombone. Said when you started playing trombone, there really wasn't much to model yourself on. You wouldn't sound like a guy like Kid Ory or George Brunis or something like that. So he said, wait a moment. So he had a record collection. It wasn't big, but it was about 78. So he went looking, he pulled out a 12-inch 78 Victor. He didn't show me what it was and label, put it on. It was a great trombonist playing Celeste Aida on the trombone. So I forget his name, he was somebody who had...
Arthur Pryor.
Arthur Pryor, who had been with Sousa and...
Yeah.
That, hey, that's before Tommy Dorsey, but it's in that vein. So it was really interesting because Vic had so much insight, and it's a pity that, bands he played with when he was young recorded very little. There's Blanche Calloway, we get some good things there, and there's the vocal he did
with Louis Russell.
Yeah. But it was really wonderful to spend time with Vic and, getting to know him better. And as far as his playing goes, I mean, there isn't once that I saw Vic many times, it isn't once that he didn't do, just wonderful things. And what made me really happy is that when I got involved in Chicago and doing these television shows with a wonderful guy named Bob Kaiser, who's gone now, who was a real jazz fan, aside from being somewhat of a television, really great director. We did Bobby and Vic together, and it's great because they were so good together, and they do this thing where Vic puts the trombone bell on top of Bobby's head, and so it captures something there. There were these really nice New Jersey couple, the Nelsons, his daughter Nancy, still sings. She's a nice singer, she's very good. But they really took good care of Vic in the last years of his life when he wasn't so well, And that's how it's through the Nelsons that the Institute got Vic's trombone, I really liked it, when I interviewed Warren Bechet. They played together in the last Condons, the Red Balaban Condons in the house band. Warren said, a lesson that he learned from Vic, which was not verbal. He said, that he was prone to playing these flowery, told him playing leads that were not, what he should have done. That Vic just turned around once, and in his ear put a trombone bell in Warren's ear and played the melody straight, just the melody without any variation. Taught me a lesson, Warren said, So, and Vic used to, he knew exactly how to level himself, because we were friends by the time he, was playing at Kindness. He would have his car parked across the street, and so on a break we would go out, and he would just do this little thing where he would take a few pokes and just have a little drink, and it was just putting it exactly on the level where he wanted to be, no overindulgence of any kind, but just, to get, because when you're playing in a club and you're playing in a band, it's almost like, there are people who were able to do this without doing anything like that, not having a drink, but that's rare. You have to deal with environment and, unexpected things, and you have to deal with your bandmates. Not always necessarily absolutely ideal. One almost ideal band I can think of, which was a lovely band that I got to see quite a lot of, was the JPJ. Was Bud Johnson, Dill Jones, Bill Pemberton, and Oliver Jackson. Yeah. They got along, those four got along so well personally and musically. It was just like an ideal group. It was wonderful. And Dill is somebody who I became very fond of, and what a great piano player. Welshman.
Yes. And he could play
Dillwyn.
Yeah. He could play a ballad, he could stomp a la Joe Sullivan, and he wrote his own tunes. A great player.
I had a band at my second wedding. Band was Dill, and I had Lee Konitz, and I forget, I should remember, it's very bad of me to have forgotten who was playing bass. I think Frank Tate, Frank.
You know what, you were getting married. You might have had other things on your mind.
But then my father was a very close friend of Al Hirschfeld. See, actually, my father got to know Dolly Haas, was her maiden name, who was a kind of German Shirley Temple. She was a teenage star in German, pre-Weimar, pre-Hitler movies, and then married first marriage was to John Brom, who was a director who's probably best known for when he came to Hollywood and made a movie called The Lodger, which was about Jack the Ripper, with Laird Krieger, who was a very short-lived actor, was very good in that part, character actor. But anyway, Al and my father became very good friends, and Al was a jazz fan. He had a very nice little record collection, 78 collection, that included the Spirits of Rhythm. Leo Watson.
That's
Leo Watson, greatest scat singer ever. So anyway, they were guests at the wedding, and Al became fascinated with Dill. He really, he went up to the piano and watched him play and everything, and I had hoped, and he was even willing to do that, that if Dill had an album, that Al would do the cover.